Lou Lamoriello has said the next move, if any, will be a hockey trade to make this team better. But can Lou pull it off? We'll break down the team needs, the latest on the Alex DeBrincat situation, and we'll answer your questions in our mailbag. All that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And we are now also available on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just do a search for Locked On Islanders. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. So much to talk about on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe something you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, feel free to email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. We'll have a few emails answered later on in today's show. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles, and you can follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYR VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all the latest Islanders news, notes, and happenings throughout this offseason. Trade rumors, hirings, firings, any more free agents that possibly come down the pike. You name it. If it's happening to the Islanders, we'll have it covered for you between now and the start of training camp in September. So a lot going on right now. Hope everybody had a great July 4th holiday. I know I kind of tried to take it easy, but I hope everyone enjoyed whatever it is that they were doing. And always great to celebrate our country's birthday. But for the Islanders right now, you know, the initial opening couple of days of free agency with all the frenzy has sort of died down, and it was a little quieter Monday and Tuesday on the free agent front, pretty much throughout the NHL. I think for the holiday weekend, teams sort of, you know, just slowed it down for a couple of days, and that's understandable. But we need to sort of figure out where the Islanders are right now. And I think, look, there were a lot of criticism, a lot of critics out there about the way Lou Lamoriello went about re-signing the Islanders' own free agents, the longer than desired or expected contracts for Scott Mayfield and Pierre Engvall and Semyon Varlamov, all of that, you know, a lot of people very critical of Lou Lamoriello for it. And everydayers, you know, if you watched or listened to the show, that while I thought that those were longer term commitments than I wanted to give those players, I didn't feel that it was so egregious because the term given to them was low enough that 3, 4, 5 years down the road, if you want to wiggle out of a deal for Pierre Engvall, that $3 million a year salary will not be prohibitive to moving him or buying him out or whatever you need to do. So I think that while there is valid criticism of the Islanders and of the way Lou Lamoriello handles things, I could see what he was trying to do, and I understand it. Don't always agree, but I understand it. But here's the situation now. This team right now is roughly back where they started last year, or back where they finished the end of last year. There are ways this team can get better by bringing back the old gang. I mean, you get Oliver Wahlstrom healthy again, and hopefully he takes a step forward. Certainly, you hope, and the Islanders need Bo Horvat to come back and he doesn't have to be as productive as he was in Vancouver the last couple of years, but something approximating that. I mean, the Islanders play a more defensive-oriented system than Vancouver did, especially under Bruce Boudreau. So, but if you can get 25 to 35 goals out of Bo Horvat, that makes your team better if he can deliver that over the course of the season. And you still have the same two major needs that we entered the offseason in. You need a puck-moving defenseman and a goal-scoring winger, and you want to make this team younger, faster, and more skilled. That everydayers know is something we've talked about on this show, and all the moves the Islanders made did not change that. Now, Engvall gives them a speedy winger, probably a middle six winger, whether he's on the second or third line. That speed is good, but again, that's what you had in the playoffs last year. And let's face it, this team is still not an elite Stanley Cup contender as of right now. They are a team that should compete for a playoff spot, but they're not guaranteed to get it. They're not one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the Eastern Conference on paper right now. But look, you got great goaltending. You've got 2 solid, your top 4 defense is pretty solid overall. You got a reliable 5th defenseman in Scott Mayfield. You have, depth at center. Certainly, maybe a little too much depth, but we'll get to that later. And, you still have those needs, but this team, at least right now, can be competitive. Not outstanding, but good to very good. And could compete, make the playoffs. The question becomes, how do you get better? Because we've seen even a team like the Carolina Hurricanes, who's ahead of the Islanders, do really well, according to most experts, in the offseason. We have seen, other teams in the conference, whether it's Detroit, whether it's even Columbus, Buffalo, other teams in the conference who are going to be fighting with the Islanders for those final playoff spots, all make moves to get better. And keep in mind, the Islanders are an older team, and over time, some of these older players will start to fade a little bit in their production, whereas teams like the Sabres and the Senators and the Blue Jackets have more young players, and their, core should improve rather than fall back. So there is that. But I'll say something else while I'm at it. Championships are not made or won by making headlines in July. How many years, Islander fans, have we seen the New York Rangers, for example, sign, 2 or 3 of the biggest free agents on the market, whether it was Chris Drury or Theo Fleury or whoever it was that they were bringing in years ago, before there was a cap, especially, where whoever the biggest names were out there in free agency, the Rangers were going to sign them, and then the season would come and there would be no chemistry on the team, and a lot of these big ticket free agents would not pan out, and the Rangers would be bad. Signing big free agents makes headlines in July, but it doesn't necessarily mean you lift the cup in June of the following year. So what the Islanders need to do now is be smart. And we have seen that Lou Lamoriello has said that, he's got to make that hockey trade. And, he said a hockey trade could be on the horizon. He said, we've signed the free agents with the dollars we had available, and now to get better, as everyone tries to do, it will be a hockey trade. I think you'll find that to be a similar situation throughout the National Hockey League after the next day or two. Well, that was said when the re-signings were done. Here we are a couple of days later, and it's time for hockey trades. So the big question now becomes, what now? Can the Islanders pull off a move for a hockey trade? Can they get either a puck-moving defenseman or a goal-scoring winger? With the cap crunch, it's probably one or the other. The big name out there right now, Alex DeBrincat. We're going to talk about the latest rumors concerning him coming up next. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting on MLB at FanDuel, and you'll get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think will hit the first home run. And hey, if you're a Yankee fan, Met fan, or if you root for one of the other teams in Major League Baseball, there's plenty of things to check out and bet on FanDuel. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. So the latest on Alex DeBrincat, and, July 4th, it was a little bit on the quiet side. But, what would it take? Among other things, you're talking about J.G. Pageau and probably Oliver Wahlstrom, and then probably your #1 pick in next year's draft. And then the Islanders would still have to do a little bit of juggling with the cap. And here's the deal. DeBrincat right now is a restricted free agent. And according to Darren Drager of TSN up in Canada, his agent is looking for a Timo Meier type of deal, which is 8 years at $8.775 AAV cap hit per year. So the Islanders right now have a little over $1 million in cap space. If you trade Pageau, then you have a little over $6 million in cap space. Maybe, Ross Johnston, if you bring him down and put him in the minors, that gives you an extra $1.1 million. It gets you close, even if you're not quite there. It probably means Zach Parise would not be coming back. But, that's sort of what it would take right now. And there's a lot of debate as to whether or not, DeBrincat is holding up a trade. His agent has denied that fact and basically said, hey, that's not the issue. But here's the other thing. The Islanders, if they are going to trade for DeBrincat, they're not going to give up a valuable third-line center like Pageau, a young potential goal-scoring winger like Wahlstrom, and a #1 pick for a short-term deal for DeBrincat. They're going to have to sign DeBrincat to a long-term deal. And if you go look at the cap situation, starting in 2024-2025, you'll be paying a lot of money to a small number of players, and adding, another Bo Horvat roughly to your salary cap would be almost impossible. You have Barzal making $9.15 million, Horvat at $8.5, Anders Lee at $7 million, Brock Nelson at $6 million, Ryan Pollock at $6.1, Adam Pelech at $5.75, and Ilya Sorokin at $8.25 million. That's a lot of money tied up in half a dozen players. And if you add DeBrincat, again, you're going to have to, even if the cap goes up $4 million before next season, and it doesn't always go up what number they expect. But even if it goes up that much, you're still going to need to clear out more salary in order to make DeBrincat's deal fit into the long-term cap situation. And here is the sort of backdoor problem with all the long-term contracts that Lou Lamoriello signed players to. It takes away a lot of your flexibility because right now you have Barzal, Horvat, Palmieri, Polak, Pelech, Mayfield, Engvall, and Sorokin all signed to contracts that go beyond 2028, 2029. You're looking at it cap friendly. They have the next 6 seasons on the board, and already you have 7 players who are still under contract beyond the next 6 seasons. And if you're going to sign DeBrincat, you're adding another one right then and there. That would be 8 players locked up super long term. So it takes away some of your flexibility and sort of creates a little bit of a log jam. That being said, DeBrincat checks all the boxes. And this is, again, to me, the reason that you really want to consider bringing him in. He is fast. He is young at 25, won't turn 26 till December. He has had a pair of 40-plus goal seasons. He is roughly a point-a-game player most of the time. And, had a little bit of a snake-bit season in Ottawa last year. But, his bad season was 27 goals and 66 points. The 27 goals, just to give you an idea, would have put him third on the Islanders behind Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, and the 66 points would have been second on the Islanders, only behind Brock Nelson. If you think about how well you could put him in on a line with Matthew Barzal, who could then return to his natural center position, or Bo Horvat, the fact that even you could spread Barzal and Horvat on 2 separate lines, or put them together on the power play with DeBrincat, it improves your power play. And if you're going to lock up somebody long-term, a 25-year-old who's already had 2 40-goal seasons is about as good a candidate as you can get. The other area that Lou Lamoriello did touch on, and I think I wanted to mention it as well, is the possibility of bringing in that puck-moving defenseman. And that is still a need for this team. There's no question about that. So you got Sebastian Aho, you've got Samuel Bolduc. If you can upgrade either one of those guys with that puck-moving defenseman, doesn't have to be, an Erik Karlsson. It doesn't have to be an elite all-star player. But certainly, if you can get even a solid second pair defenseman on the left side who can be better defensively than Aho and even just move the puck as well as Aho and won't cough it up as often as Aho does because of his size that he sometimes struggles to clear the zone, that is a big improvement also for this team. And it is something that they could do with a trade and possibly even coordinate trades where you free up some cap space in order to acquire that relatively inexpensive puck-moving defenseman in a trade. And then you're able to swing the deal for DeBrincat or some other center or a winger rather. And that frees you up to make another deal to get the goal scorer. It's doable. It's not easy. I know Islander fans, we have all been burned too many times before. Just think back to last offseason, where the Islanders were just waiting and waiting for Kadri and Goudreau and all these other high-profile players who they were in on but never got. So I don't want to get hopes artificially up, but at least now Lou is talking about making that hockey trade, and let's hope he can get it done. All right, we've got more to get to on today's show. We're going to answer your questions. Some of these dated back to last week, but with all the signings and then having Hadi Kalakesh on the show yesterday to talk about the draft class, I'm finally getting to these questions now, so I apologize, but we'll have that plus our Islanders birthday of the day coming up next on the Locked On Islanders podcast. All right, so let's get to some of your questions. And don't forget, lockedonislanders@gmail.com if you want to ask them. This one is from Brian from Bayshore. He says, I was wondering with the draft being over and talking in these past few episodes about prospects and how a lot of them haven't worked out for us. I was wondering if you think we could use a new coaching staff at Bridgeport to get our prospects to the potential we think they have, and maybe more, since a lot of them aren't even getting to where we thought their floor would be. I have a second question as well. I was wondering, since there is an NHL-sized rink opening out east in Calverton, do you think eventually when their contract in Bridgeport ends, we might see an AHL team come to the island? Brian, first of all, thank you for these two questions. I don't think Lou Lamoriello is looking to make a change in the coaching staff in Bridgeport, but I do think, Brian, it's a fair criticism. So I think it's something that we will need to revisit. And the fact that Bridgeport only made the playoffs once in the last, 4 or 5 years, and what did they won a round for the first time in 2022, for the first time in way too long. I think it would be something that if they continue to struggle developing players, that's something they should do. As far as putting a farm team out east in Calverton, you mentioned in the email that there's like 8 years left on the Bridgeport deal, but do I think it's eventually possible down the line? Yeah, it very well could be, and let's see if we ever get to that point. It's intriguing, to say the least, and I'd love to see a team out east. This next one is from Frank in North Patchogue. It was good for Lou to sign Varley, Mayfield, and Engvall, but for the length of time he signed them for, you talk about diminishing returns. What can we expect from Mayfield and Engvall toward the end of their contracts? Varley could have signed for 2 years, not 4. He's 35 already. So Sorokin might have to play 60-plus games as his contract progresses. Signing for Sorokin for 8 years was proper because he's young and deserving of the value of that contract. Now it will be difficult to trade for a younger sniper or puck-moving defenseman with the 30-something guys the Isles have now. I guess Lou likes an old team just like him. Love the podcast, as always. You always tell it like it is. Frank, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the podcast. I think, and everydayers know I've discussed, because the salaries are low on Engvall and Mayfield and even on Varley, that they will be movable down the road if they need to move them. Let's hope that they're able to do that if it comes to that, when there are diminishing returns down the road. But if the salary cap and the salaries keep going up every year for the next 4 years, $3 million for a third or fourth line winger like Engvall, or $3.75 million for a third pair defenseman like Mayfield, especially a right-handed defenseman, will be a bargain. And there will be teams, I think, that would be willing to make that move. Last email, Tony from Maryland. He says, this question is more for your opinion and nothing else. As you know, before the trade deadline, the Islanders acquired Bo Horvat from the Canucks for Anthony Beauvillier and Atu Ratu. My question is about the conditional first-round pick. As I understood it, the Islanders finished the regular season in the lower third of the NHL. We would have held on to that first-round pick this year, and the Canucks would have had our first-round pick next year. Let me say I wouldn't do anything unethical, but this is a hypothetical question. I'm glad the Islanders played the way they did and made the playoffs, but hindsight being 2020 and the Islanders were eliminated early, should they have tanked the rest of the season and then held on to the first-round pick in this year's draft? And if so, who would they have selected? Hard to say who they would have selected, depending on where. The pick was lottery protected. So that's sort of the question. I don't know, if they would have not made the playoffs and won in the lottery and moved up, they would have been able to hold on to the pick, but it didn't work out that way. Look, you never want to tank if you have a chance to make the playoffs. If your team is bad or not going to make the playoffs and you want to try to get that generational talent like Connor Bedard or some other elite player, maybe you can go that route, but it's not something you can ethically do in the NHL. And to me, last year, it wouldn't have been appropriate. You're right. Hindsight is 2020, but we couldn't have known, Tony, that the Islanders were not going to make advance beyond the first round of the playoffs, at least not realistically, officially. So you still have to try to play to win. And so many of those games against Carolina were close enough that the Islanders had a chance to do just that. Thank everybody again for the emails and the kind words. Again, we're always here to answer your questions throughout the offseason and during the season. LockedOnIslanders@gmail.com to send them in. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. Today is the 43rd birthday of former Islanders winger Trent Hunter. Hunter was drafted by the Anaheim Mighty Ducks in the 6th round back in 1998, but made his NHL debut with the Isles in the 2001-2002 playoffs, where he played in 4 games and had his first NHL goal, but became a full-time Islander in 03-04, where he had a career-high 25 goals and 51 points, had another 20-goal season for the Isles in 06-07, stayed with the team till the 2010-2011 season, and then moved on to the LA Kings, where he finished out his career in 2011-2012. Hunter, 6'3", 210, pretty big forward, played in 497 NHL games, 101 goals, 236 points, 209 penalty minutes, add 4 goals and an assist in 14 playoff games, all of those with the Islanders. We go back and look at one of his better games with the Isles, November 19th, 2003. In South Florida, Islanders with Rick DiPietro in goal, ex-Islander Roberto Luongo in goal for the Florida Panthers. And in this game, Trent Hunter, 2 goals and an assist. He was a +3, had 3 shots on goal, and he helped the Islanders to a 4-1 win over the Florida Panthers. 26 saves for Rick DiPietro. Sean Bates, a goal and 2 assists in that game. And for Trent Hunter, both goals and the assist at even strength. So Trent Hunter, a solid Islander for quite some time, who is now 43 years old today. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. Thanks for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the show, we'll keep you up to date on all the latest rumors concerning Alex DeBrincat, any other trade rumors that come up. We'll have it all for you here on Locked On Islanders. Until then, stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. And, of course, let's go Islanders.